Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Saleh Family Speaks. Today is certainly the most anticipated podcast. We are filming on location, and when I say on location, I mean there's a baby sleeping, not on the coffee table, but the baby monitor. So we have two very special guests today, much anticipated from us. I know we've been trying to make this happen for a while, and alhamdulillah, it worked out where you happen to be in our neck of the woods, literally. If you look outside, we're kind of out in the woods. But so I don't think there needs to be too much introduction, but in case you didn't know by the sound of his voice, because it is something that is very compelling and very unique, it is Shaun King and his amazing wife, Ray. Thank you guys so much for coming on the show.
No, thanks for being here, and thanks for having us in your home. You all had us have a delicious meal. Mm-hmm. We met your beautiful babies. And what people won't know is that there are toys pushed off to the side.
Many toys.
Yeah, we are in the house. And so if people hear baby noises, it's because we are home.
That's it.
In a home full of life.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Amazing. Yeah. Very, very well said.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, you guys. We're really excited to get to know you guys on a more personal level and have our audience also get to know you on a more personal level. So should we just start right from the beginning?
I think, yeah.
And then kind of work our way through into where we are right now?
I think, honestly, a lot of people in general, they know you, they know, the struggle that you've had, they know that, what you've done with, for so many years with, civil rights and standing up for truth and justice. But they may not know who you are as a person.
Sure.
And I think that that's such an important thing, because what you see on TV or what you see in the media, social media, it isn't always the main factor or the main thing of who we are. And we know that as content creators as well, because, sometimes you just want to get out there and talk about, the real things in life. And so that's kind of why we wanted to put this together and get to know you, both of you, at a more personal level.
Even the funny thing is, I followed you all in huge part because I see myself first and foremost as a dad.
Yeah.
And we chose years ago to not really post pictures of our kids, in part for safety. Our kids would often be away from us where we couldn't keep a close eye on them. We have kids in middle school, high school, and college. And so there's a huge part of my life that the world doesn't see. But when I wake up in the morning, I never saw myself. When I look in the mirror, I don't see an activist. I never saw myself as a social media personality.
Although sometimes when he gets a little full of himself, I call him at Shaun King in those moments. I'm like, you're being real at Shaun King right now.
There is no at Shaun King now.
Right.
But we did just talk about that, where people would address, you would hear those whispers that it's at Shaun King.
No way, actually.
All the time, because most people don't know me through their living room. They know me through social media. So we lived in Brooklyn for years, and we'd be on the train, and I would always see people looking, and you could see people whispering. They recognized me. People were always kind, but they would always say, "Oh, there's at Shaun King." Gosh. It was hilarious to me because I realized that people struggle to see me apart from social media. But you're all social media content, and it's family based. Yeah. So I loved it because we have 5 kids.
MashaAllah. That's amazing.
Ray and I have been together since we were 15 and 16. I'm 44.
Wow.
So we've been together for 29 years.
Wow.
Before I was at Shaun King.
Amazing.
Before there was a Twitter. Before there was a YouTube, we were together.
Social media,
yeah, before there was social media, we were parents.
That's
and
crazy.
So we love parents, we love families, we love children, and a much bigger part of my life is being a husband and father than it is creating content, even than it is being an activist or an organizer. Most of my day is spent, I'm like a glorified Uber driver, driving my children all over the place.
Yeah.
It's a dad thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
but does Ray argue with you about wanting to drive?
No, never.
No.
I still do. I still do. I'm
You
like,
want
why
to
do you
drive?
always drive?
I love to be a chauffeur. I like to drive.
Yeah.
So just like that, you're just getting driven around everywhere.
No, I insist on it. Yeah.
Well, so let me. I don't know how much you all have this discussion, or people who are watching this. So, as a husband and father, what I've learned is for most of our marriage, I've actually done the easy things. It is easy to drive the kids. Now, is it time consuming? Do I love it? Not necessarily, but these are the things that don't necessarily require me to be smart. And my wife is often doing the more difficult things that require her brain, and I'm doing like the dumb dad stuff,
the grunt work.
I'm running the errands. Yeah. I'm repairing things in the house, or hiring someone to repair something in the house.
That part, that's more likely.
Yeah. And so, we have our roles, but I started there to say, I see myself more as a dad than anything else. And even
people are always so surprised because he does all the morning drop-offs, all the afternoon pickups, and we will be like, we have a daughter that plays club volleyball. We'll be in the most random places, and people will be like, they'll walk by, and then I almost have to do a double take, like, is that Shaun King? Because he'll
Shaun
be
King,
like,
the soccer mom?
Yeah, seriously. Just like at every volleyball tournament, every volleyball practice all across the country, he's there. People never expect to see him in those places.
The question we get when we're out and about, and I'm just being a dad, is people will say, has anybody ever told you that you look so much like Shaun King?
No,
and they're not
way.
playing. They're dead serious.
Wow.
And they'll say, you look so much like Shaun King.
You even have the accent.
But what's your response to that though? Do you
only once
play it off?
No, one time I was like, I have heard that before.
Yeah.
And they were like, wow. And they just but every other time I'll say, I'll say, I'm Shaun, nice to meet you. But even the work that I do for Palestine or for oppressed people around the world, so much of what I do with the lens of a father.
Yeah.
My heart breaks for Gaza every day because I see children, I see parents, I see grandparents. Children. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so much of who I am really is a father. And that's even what knitted my heart to you all, is I saw you all as young parents, and see the work that you are trying to do as well, and just thought it was beautiful. And a lot of times my life is very stressful, and so I just had fun following you. It gave me joy to see it. Amazing. And then we just connected privately, and so I'm glad that we get to be together.
Absolutely. So I think that a question that I would have,
the
girls, you got to go upstairs. Because you're being way too loud.
Or go in Emmy's room.
Don't trip. Oh, don't trip.
Poor baby.
Okay. All right. That's it, man. It's when you film in a house, it is what it is.
Well, we're not stressed. We only feel bad for you. So don't worry about us even a little bit.
Hey, if you feel bad for me, just project that onto Sana, because at the end of the day, as just like you mentioned, with the fact that what it is that we do as fathers is definitely, we're the ones who will open the jars, because that's what we do. We're the ones who take all of the bags of groceries at once from the car because we cannot handle making 2 trips. We'll do the driving and all of that, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to the real work, the real effort, our wives are
for sure
far beyond anything that we could ever possibly be. As you can tell, with all of the the baby monitors and the situations going on here, Sana is she's honestly the epitome. And I grew up in a household with lots of kids coming and going, and my sister's having lots of kids, and seeing a lot of people and children, the dynamics that are there, from someone like her who didn't have any of that, and just being able to switch into being a mother. It is like it's such an instinctual thing. That it blows my mind, honestly. Like when we just came back from Malaysia, so on the trip, any trip, honestly, when we pack, sorry, let me rephrase that. When she packs,
right,
it's like her mental checklist is everything you could possibly imagine for every possible scenario, especially going for 4 months, and the things like the night before, I'll throw my clothes in the suitcase and my toothbrush. I'm like, okay, I'm packed. I'm ready. I did something good, right? So yeah, it's a big shout out to all of those hardworking moms and wives, and it's just something that, you know, it's beyond me. I think it's beyond the scope of a man to really kind of understand just how special and how lucky that we actually are. But to shift, you know, the accent of Shaun King.
Yes.
So let's take it back. Where does that accent come from?
So,
Let's go way back.
You know, it's like
It doesn't sound like Brooklyn.
No, definitely doesn't. It's not Brooklyn.
A little more south than Brooklyn.
Yes, yeah? Yes. So we what we call the word we use is country. I'm even more country than she is, but we're from Kentucky originally, and so I've been away from Kentucky for 30 years. But that's where you develop your. So we went from Kentucky, and then we were either in Kentucky or Georgia until we were 30.
Oh wow!
And so we really came of age in the deep South. And so I joke because some of the brothers that I travel with are British. So I hear a British accent.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't have an accent.
Really?
Like they think we have an accent. So they don't think they have a British accent. They
That's
think
so
we
funny.
have an American accent.
Yeah.
And so when I hear myself, I hear nothing.
Yeah.
You know, and so
You're human.
yeah, I'm always surprised when people do hear my accent. But yeah, we're from the South. And so
Amazing.
we moved from Georgia to New York, or maybe California to New York, when I took a job with the New York Daily
we were
News.
in Georgia at that point.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we were both born in Kentucky, and Ray lived some in Cincinnati, which is just right on the top of northern Kentucky. But most of our childhood was spent growing up there. One of the things that we were so excited about, we learned that when we were in middle school, we did not know each other, but we were at a talent show together when we were very young, and she performed at the talent show.
What?
And
I was a rapper.
Really?
yes.
That's so funny now when I tell people that, because I am like the opposite of a rapper. But when I was I mean, honestly, we grew up in the 90s,
Of course.
early 2000s. Like, it was the heyday of women in rap, in my opinion. And so, of course, yeah, I was a rapper, and I was rapping at this talent show, and we didn't realize until a couple years later that we were at that same talent show.
Wow.
We had what clued me in is we had one of my friends, she also knew, and I was like, oh, the world is so small. And then I don't even remember how we eventually learned that we were both at this.
But were you performing?
No, I was
were
just
just
there.
like-
I was just there.
So
like,
do you remember her performing?
I don't remember the performance, but I do remember her performing. Like, I couldn't tell you what I don't even know if she remembers fully. Do you remember what you rapped?
I've got one bar.
Can we get a beat? Can we get a beat?
Oh no, listen. No, she is the ham of the family. Yes, she will give you her one bar.
No,
yes.
Let's hear it. Let's do it.
No, I absolutely will not.
What?
Yeah, I'm a Muslima. Come on, be for
Oh,
real.
okay.
You asked me to do something haram.
Well, technically, this would be spoken word.
Yes, there is no beat. There is no music.
Yeah, I guess that's true, but no, I'm definitely
Not
not.
gonna go down that road?
I'm not. I can't do it. It's too embarrassing.
That's-
But yeah, it was not a long or illustrious rap career, but.
Well, we grew up both with single mothers who were sweet as sugar and loved us dearly, but struggled economically. Or, I almost, from the time I was in kindergarten on, we never had a man in the house. I didn't even have like uncles or grandfathers that played any real role in my life.
So you had that strong woman
Well,
representation.
you know what I tell people, and what I've always said is that I had some of my friends who would say, like, man, growing up, their mother was their mother and their father.
Yeah.
My mother was really just a sweet mother. And the consequence of that was there was an absence for me where my mother, she didn't teach me anything. She didn't even try to teach me how to be a man. And so, there was an absence of understanding how to be in a healthy relationship, what the role of a man was. But we grew up with these sweet mothers who both in central Kentucky, where we're from, it's a very hardworking place. And so for our entire lives, we were used to our mothers grinding, working full-time jobs, but still barely able to make ends meet on their own. And And so we grew up, even though we didn't know each other as little children, we had a very similar upbringing. The biggest difference was in my household, it was not religious at all. My mother was not. Okay. My mother, to this day, believes in God in a passive way, but we didn't really go to church. And she told me in retrospect that this small town that we grew up in, she was a single mother at a time where she felt single mothers were like looked at strangely. And so she just didn't want to deal with what she thought were people talking about her. Right. And
she didn't want to give them a reason to kind of make those.
So, but I grew up not even very mindful or thoughtful about God, whereas Ray grew up in a deeply religious household. And, when we met, we eventually met in church. And for most of our lives, we were devout Christians together.
He was the new kid on the block when we met in church. Like, he was like newly saved.
This is the phrase that you that we use in church.
I think you were like 16, 17 years old. At the time.
Was she rapping in church or was she singing part of the choir?
No.
I was always singing, yes. Definitely in the choir.
She was a singer. And so let me go back just a little bit. When I think we both had relatively happy childhoods. We were both, the two of us were each really doted on by our mothers. And our mothers had big dreams for each of us, which I think in retrospect we now know helped us in ways that we never could have imagined. And for me as a young boy, I grew up in a place where I was very much a bridge builder between race, particularly in the town I grew up in, between black children and white children, between poor children and there were I don't think there were anybody wealthy in my town, but children who were very, very poor and children who were well off. I always found myself as a bridge between people. And when I got to high school, we had not met yet. And in this town I grew up in, she grew up in Lexington. I grew up in a small town. It's called Versailles, but it looks like Versailles in France.
Yeah.
Just they're too country to call it Versailles. And it was a deeply racist town.
So that's something that I want to, being obviously way up north where we are here. You always hear about that, especially, not so much in this age, but, growing up 90s, the 80s, as the further you go back, obviously in the South, in the US, that deep-seated racism that even as Canadians, we understood that, kind of the further you go, the worse it gets. Now, I have a question in regards to that, is that someone like yourself, right? Because if people just look at you, and I'm sure you've probably experienced this probably your whole life, is they would maybe they wouldn't initially think African American, or they think
we
white.
Call it ethnically ambiguous. Growing up in this town, I could have passed for white at any point in time. That was part of even my ability to bridge cultures and be able to operate in different circles. But when I got in high school, it was very different. And you were really expected to check one box and one box alone. There was very little space to be a bridge builder. Mm-hmm. So just a few weeks into high school, the racial tensions at my school had been going on for generations, long before I ever got there. My mother, a sweet white woman who worked at a local factory, taught me nothing about racism. She had nothing to teach me. She taught me not to be racist, but that was about it. Yeah. So when I got to this high school, whereas most of my black friends had been well prepared for what to experience, I was constantly saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, not knowing. And so I constantly found myself having to defend myself. For the first time, I was in fist fights all the time. And eventually, my sophomore year in high school, and had this not happened, I doubt we would have ever met. My sophomore year in high school, I know because this is like a before and after moment in my life. On March the 8th of 1995, I was beaten so badly that I missed the rest of my sophomore year and all of my junior year of high school.
Wow.
I had fractures in my face and ribs. I had 3 spinal surgeries. And while I was recovering from the 3rd spinal surgery, my best friend, his father was a Christian pastor. And he would regularly come to visit me. I'm thankful to this day for him. And he would come to visit me and encourage me. And he was the first person that ever prayed with me. And he prayed prayers that were simple and easy for me to understand. And I found myself wanting to be like this man. And I joke, I said this in my first book. Had that man been a guitar player, I would have wanted to play the guitar.
That's right.
Had he been a garbage man, I would have said, like, how do I do this? He was a pastor.
Amazing.
And eventually he would pick me up and bring me to church. And that's where I saw my wife. And
Tell them the story of how you saw me, where you were sitting.
yeah. So once it was known in the town that I was not white, the treatment of me plummeted drastically. And so,
Well, let me say this though. I will say it's an experience that I think is pretty unique to the United States, because, like he said, white people grow up with a really low racial IQ. I think that may be changing a little bit now, but certainly when
Back
we were
then,
kids
no.
in the 80s.
this is pre-internet,
Yeah.
pre-YouTube.
And so the black children in his town always knew. It's like people can recognize their own, and then also he had the experience of, as he said, really small town. His mom worked in a light bulb factory. It was like one of 2 or 3 factories in the town, so everyone knew each other. And so he always had black friends, even as a little kindergartner. And eventually the parents started saying things to him about, we know who you are, we know who your father is, and they always, and not in a nefarious way, but just in a way was like, you're ours, you're one of us, we want you to.
Yeah, I have a very sweet part. I'm writing a memoir, and I now have to, and if I use someone's name, I find them on Facebook, and I'm like, hey, do I have your permission to tell this story? Wow. I'm going to tell the story. It's just, can I use your name? And when I was in 2nd grade, 2 girls that I went to school with from kindergarten all the way through high school. I lived in this town my entire childhood. I was in line in the cafeteria, and I always thought myself to be, I don't mean to say cool, like cool in a bully way, but I was like a stoic, cool kid. And the 2 girls, 2 young, giggly black girls came up to me, and they said something to me that confused me so much. They came up to me and they said, and they were laughing and giggling, and they said, "Are you mixed?" And I had never heard this term, mixed. Again, this is, if my math is right, this is 1986. Okay,
That's when he was born.
The year I was born.
yeah.
Yes.
So now again, the things that help us be informed of the world, like social media, like YouTube, Google, none of this existed.
Cell phones didn't even
Yeah.
exist.
To learn about the world, if you were lucky, you had encyclopedias at home.
I was just gonna
Pretend.
say
Yes.
it's the encyclopedias.
Yeah,
I still
and
remember
there was
those.
nothing about being mixed in the encyclopedia,
Correct.
and so when they asked me this, they knew what it meant. But as Ray said, white families don't talk about this, and so I knew nothing So as I would do, I just like shrugged my shoulders and was like, and they just like went off and started.
You'd have to see a picture of him. I don't know how, if you've posted pictures of you really little, you have to post that one your mom just sent us. It's hilarious. But he had like poofy kind of it was like kind of curly hair, but mostly poofy and it was something that black folks, even black children, would recognize as not particularly white, whereas maybe white kids would not have an eye for that and wouldn't even be thinking about it. Yeah.
So that sent me down, because I didn't know my father, and it sent me down a weird rabbit hole where for the rest of my life in this little town, black families really took me under their wing. And in this town, they believed they knew who my father was. Like it was kind of a well-known secret in the town. And so when I got to high school, it was an incredibly stressful time for me because all of these years of having friends from every group, in high school, you picked a group, and particularly in this town. And within weeks, for the first time in my life, white children would look me in my face and call me the N-word. I mean, right in my face. I had a kid. My school was so country that white kids were allowed to chew chewing tobacco in school.
Wow.
That was a thing.
No, and they would have
country.
bottles that they would spit into, and I was literally walking down the hall. Wow. I'm a proud freshman in high school, and a guy threw a jar of tobacco spit in my face. Oh my God. All of these moments, I now know, I can look back in retrospect. These moments shaped me,
absolutely,
made me. My heart for justice, my heart for people who are being bullied or abused or mistreated. All of that was kind of burned into me.
I mean, literally, you were chased home from school by guys in a pickup truck, you know, and you're running. And so just to think about someone who now advocates for folks who are experiencing some of the worst terror, it's like you can kind of understand. It's kind of like an origin story, I guess, to talk about, superheroes. Not calling you a superhero, you know, I think you're great,
listen.
You know.
I think that most definitely there are people out there who would agree with that term.
Well,
but it comes from
a place.
Of like experiencing real terror, like having people drive up in his mom's yard and like kind of make donuts in the yard, just like things that were meant to induce terror and fear.
And this isn't in the 50s or 60s. This isn't even in the 80s. This is in the early 90s. But this town was just deeply racist. In my last book, I did research in my first chapter. We never talked about this in our town. Multiple black men were lynched in this town, and from the 1880s all through the 1950s. These were things you just never spoke of. So by the time I got into high school, this town had a deep, deep history of racism and slavery in this town. And
you're dealing with the children of the people who grew up in that
absolutely,
area, right?
Absolutely.
And as someone who grew up in a vastly, overwhelmingly, predominantly white environment, white culture, without any sense of culture other than, what is white, I can only imagine how difficult, not just being you there, but looking around you and seeing, especially the more you become educated, the more you learn about everything that had taken place and transpired in your own life, circumstances and things that had happened. But it must have been a feeling of like helplessness almost.
Oh man, no. And again, like the ways, good and bad, that kids escape now from looking at the internet, looking at social media, seeing things that they might be able to do in the world. We had none of that. So I very much felt trapped and could not wait to leave. My sophomore year in high school was beaten so badly. And this, I missed the rest of my sophomore year, all of my junior year of high school. And it was while recovering from those injuries that my friend's father, I didn't even think of him as a pastor, it's just my best friend's father, he would pick me up and take me to church. And I would sit up. I was still recovering from the surgeries. And I would sit up in the balcony of the church. And there was this spunky girl who always wore hats. And she would do things that you thought adults were supposed to do. She was like the church treasurer and like a Sunday school treasurer.
Sunday school treasurer. Yes, definitely not the church.
She would do like the church announcements for the whole church. And I was just thinking like, who is this? And again, we were not Muslims, and so dating was common, and
although I will say I was only 15 and like he said, had a single mother, family full of women. So when he wanted to take me out for the first time, it was a very big deal. And everybody in the family, my mom, my grandmother, my aunt, all had something to say about it. My mom had to approve the movie he wanted to take me to. She didn't approve. He wanted to take me to see Love Jones.
I was just going to ask you what movie was
Love Jones. And
it was rated R. It was,
but we went to see Jerry Maguire, which wasn't much better, but I guess it didn't have the romantic
it was PG-13
angle.
So.
So we weren't Muslim, but my family was also like, because very much like Shaun, and I think he said this, we both had the privilege of being the doted on, child in our families. And my family had really big hopes and expectations for me going to college, being the first one. Going to college and everything. And they weren't about to let this knucklehead come along and mess it up.
I can absolutely relate to that on your side of it for sure. That was, as we've talked about a bit, with our story, is that for us in the beginning, it was a hard no. Absolutely do not talk about it. Which is interesting because I don't know if I've mentioned this before. I don't know if you're comfortable with it, but we'll put it out there to the world. The night that we met, so we worked together at Future Shop, Best Buy. You guys had Best Buy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially Canada's version of Best Buy before they bought it out. And I had worked there for 3 months as a seasonal employee. I got laid off and I got called back. On day one, when I walked in the doors, and I told this to the girls the other night, and they were like, wow, it's so
such a fairy tale princess story.
I walked in for the first day of training and I saw Sana and it was like the angels and and I saw this girl and I was like amazed. And for 3 months we never spoke to each other. We barely even saw each other. And then when I came back to work right after I had gotten laid off, I walked into the staff room, and if you remember, Russell Peters was on the TV. Now, for the people watching that may not know, Russell Peters is very racially focused in terms of his jokes. And I sat down and it was the only two of us were in there. And then he started to crack jokes about brown people. And I love comedy. I love comedy, especially, like American comedy or, that side of it, even though Russell Peters is Canadian, shout out. And I had this moment where I was like, I'm holding.
Should I laugh or should I not laugh?
And it was so hard for me. And then she started laughing, and so I was like, just let it out. And that's what started our conversation. But that night, I told her. She said, obviously she was a Muslim, I wasn't at the time, and she said, no, I believe that everybody, there's a reason why you meet people, and she said, I wonder what the reason is that we met. And I looked her straight in the eye and I said, well, it's because we're supposed to get married and have lots of kids. And she was like, okay.
That's a lot to say.
Yeah. So
it's a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, but I meant every word of it, right? And so, shifting back to what we're speaking about is like, I knew right then and there that's just having a conversation. We talked for 3 hours. We were supposed to be working at the time. My apologies. But we got to know each other. It was crazy because we didn't know each other. And then just to have this crazy conversation, and it revolved around Islam and terrorism and my perceptions and
9/11.
Yeah, exactly. And what you were explaining to me that Islam wasn't, and that's actually how my journey began. But the side of it where you have the family, the big hard no, and it took us 5 years.
Thankfully, it was like a soft no. They had seen him. My mom, like I said, because I grew up in church, it was a huge part of my life.
I think I was friends with your mother before I was friends with you.
Yeah, she saw him go get baptized when he got baptized at the church and all those kinds of things. So they liked him, but they were just hesitant. I was 15 years old, and he had a car, and I'd never had a boy come pick me up and take me out. But because
you had a cheap boyfriend.
Okay, please stop. First of all, they were not boyfriends. Don't put me out there like that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and boyfriends, plural. And no, they were not cheap. You were just older. You were 2 years older than me.
He cared more, as what the moral of this.
No, honestly, really, he was very different. I don't know that it was I don't know if he looked at me and was like, that's my wife. And I certainly didn't look at him and was like, that's the man I'm going to marry.
It's okay. She did the same to me.
We had to earn our place.
But we connected, and I think I didn't know for maybe at least a year or two of talking his backstory. And I met him right on the heels of him recovering from his last surgery, just now getting back into school, becoming a Christian. Like, we were so cheesy, we would literally take our Bibles on our dates, you know, and like,
That's really cute. Though,
yeah,
I
read a
gotta
little
say.
scripture together or whatever. But I didn't know everything that I was meeting him on the heels of. And it took years to unpack that and uncover that and realize, you know, kind of what and who I had been tied to in that way.
Yeah, I think I didn't want her or anybody to just know me through the lens of what I had overcome.
Absolutely.
And I never imagined that I would have to go through what I went through. And my life before that was so different. I had so many dreams and hopes and aspirations that had nothing to do with civil rights, human rights. So the man that I eventually became, even as a young man, I eventually became a student leader in college. But the harassment and bigotry and the assault, it changed me.
Yeah.
It shaped your future, right?
Yeah, it changed the entire trajectory of my life.
When did you read the autobiography of Malcolm X? Was that before or during your recovery?
No, it was while I was recovering from maybe my first or second spinal surgery. And it was just brutal.
And I want you all to picture it like he was a, you know, young, really vibrant kid. He worked, wore gold chains. He was like Mr. Cool or whatever. And then this thing happened and it literally put him on his back. Like he could not walk. He could not get out of bed. Every day was in excruciating pain. So it's not like, you know, he was recovering and still getting to be a teenager. It drastically changed his life.
The first two surgeries I had were like failed surgeries.
Oh no.
So I had to have this. So all it was 6 months of excruciating pain. And I was not suicidal. I don't say that to brag, but I preferred death over the pain that I was experiencing. And I said, we grew up in an age where I didn't even know that suicide was an option. I don't say this to joke. Had I known it was an option, I literally might have considered it. But we grew up in a place in a time where I hadn't even heard of it.
Yeah.
And so I didn't even know there was any way out of the suffering I was experiencing.
And meanwhile, your mom's a single mom. She still has to leave every day and go to work. She didn't get like a year off to take care of her son. And so it was like literally like, here's the phone, not a cell phone.
That's
remember,
right.
like I'm going to drag the phone over here to you. Here's some water. Here's some food. You're bedridden, but you're going to have to take care of yourself until I get back home from work.
I can't even imagine what it must be like being a teen, going through all of that, and just you're just all you have is like your thoughts, basically.
My wife brought up the autobiography of Malcolm X because it had a huge impact on me. I found in that book somebody who had also been through a lot of suffering. Brother Malcolm, his father was murdered when he was just a boy. Yeah. Their home had been set on fire when he was a boy. Before he ever became Malcolm X, he had been to prison. He had been arrested multiple times. His mother was committed to a mental institution at a time where mental health was
horrific.
Yeah. She literally probably could have seen in modern day a therapist and made it through what she was enduring. She was really a woman that was overcome with grief.
Yeah.
Her husband
and children.
And
she had many children to raise.
And so I saw this man who found himself in prison at the lowest place he thought a human could be. The prison guards called him the devil. Like he was even, in his own words, he was a horrible prisoner. And so I found this man who had found himself in these awful circumstances, but through faith, his entire life changed.
Absolutely.
And
to the point where we're sitting here all of these years later,
That's right.
and we're talking about Brother Malcolm.
Yeah, in fact, Brother Malcolm played a significant role in introducing Islam to North America.
Absolutely.
At the time, there were so few Muslims in the United States. I wouldn't call myself an expert on Brother Malcolm, but I've come to know his family. I've read as many books as I could about his life. He didn't speak Arabic, and there was no one to teach him Arabic. He didn't even have an Arabic translation to go and see. So all he had was a decently translated English version of the Quran. And eventually, in his faith journey, he went to Mecca. He took Hajj, and then he became extremely curious because Muslims around the world were saying, "Hey, there's actually some things we want to teach you that you don't know about." But he was my introduction to Islam, and
that's incredible.
Yeah, and in 1996, my senior year in high school, the baby's crying, and yeah.
It's real, like we said. It's as real as it gets, ladies and gentlemen.
No, and what I told you earlier is true. Baby's crying. This isn't on my nerves. I feel like we're on your nerve. We're in your house.
No, man. Again, when Superwoman lives in the same house as you, you don't have to worry too much. So jumping right back in, guys, kind of after a pause, but Sun is back now. Superwoman, Supermom.
By the way, we're struggling through jet lag right now.
Jet lag, absolutely.
He's like daytime, nighttime, not sure what's going on.
But it's not as bad as it was when we went to Dubai. We finally settled into bed at 7 a.m, and for 3 days he didn't sleep at night. So it was brutal. Yeah. But to jump back, so we've talked a lot about your past and growing up, and I there's so much we could talk about and spend hours doing. A bit of your introduction towards Islam, and flash forward now you guys have accepted Islam, which is mashallah amazing. Someone like myself is a revert of I think 15 years now. Alhamdulillah. There's so much to unpack with that conversation. We'll save a lot of that for another day. But one thing I want to ask you, and it is this moment. If you could turn that on and tell me that moment, what is going through your mind?
Okay.
That's so fun.
Okay, first off, I didn't know that my wife. This is a picture. I'm looking out our back.
On the screen.
Yeah, this is a picture. I'm looking out the back window, and I had no idea that my wife took this. And even when she posted, I didn't even know that she posted it.
Oh wow!
And then
she knew better.
It actually went super viral. People saying that we had staged a photo, which we did. We didn't stage it, but on the evening of October 7th, many people in my world. Colleagues, friends, Jewish colleagues and friends were saying like, Shaun, we really need you to say something about what has happened. And I had very strong feelings. At that time, I was still learning in real time, and I wasn't sure what was true and what wasn't.
Of course.
And so I was very careful. This picture is maybe on October the 8th.
Wow.
I think it was even, we'll have to go back and look. I feel like it was a couple days even later than that, because
that's my background. It's not actually.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to see it, because I remember the question was, where's Shaun King? Like, why hasn't he said anything about it?
Yeah, and I was actually, I had been off of social media, not because I was banned. I was taking a break from social media for a month. That was my goal. And I was only like 2.5 weeks in.
Wow. Then
October 7th happened. And part of what I was wrestling with is like, well, I'm not supposed to be on social media right now. And by October 9th, it was people from many different groups saying like, we really, really need you to say something.
We need you.
Yeah.
And
that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, well, what I understood was what I knew I needed to say, and what I was feeling was not what most of the people that were asking me to say something wanted to hear. Mm-hmm. And my even interpretation of October 7th was very, very different than what they were expecting. And just to tell you, when I was looking out there, I knew that once I entered the conversation, that there was no turning back.
No turning back.
So when I was looking out of that window, what I actually was thinking about was, what is this going to do to my family? Mm-hmm. And what will this do to my kids? Mm-hmm. That window that I'm looking out of, I had to move my family basically to a safe house a year before that photo was taken, because the New York Post published photos of our home. White
Oh, my
supremacists
God.
started showing up at our house, and we had to flee and sell our home.
And we had just bought that house less than a year before then. After not being homeowners for 20 years, we had lived all across the country. That house was like, it was our pride
That
and
was it.
joy,
Absolutely.
like,
The house that we had to sell and flee, we had to pull our kids out of school.
yeah.
So I was looking out of that window. I was actually really stressed because I knew what was required of me in the moment. And it was my feeling and instinct that it was about to change my life and my family's life. But Ray wanted me to do what I did. I knew that I needed to, but frankly, I was still very traumatized from what my family had just gone through. And I was really hesitant to put my family through that again.
And I will say, we kind of had that conversation on the couch in my office before I took that picture. I was very surprised that he felt that way, because he had never hesitated before to jump into the fray of anything. And even I had kind of begun
Not
to
even
wonder.
for Palestine. I've
especially
advocated for
not
Palestine for most of my adult life. I knew that this moment, as it is today, I knew that moment was very, very different.
Absolutely.
And
By the way, I didn't know people had said all of those crazy things about that photo until months later. I had no idea.
which is good.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. Well, the reason I asked you to give us a brief explanation about the photo is because we left home on October 8th. We flew to Spain, and we were there for a week or a week and a half. And so it was when we landed, the kind of retaliation hadn't happened yet. So when we were sitting in the mountains, in the Sierra Nevada mountains in Spain, in this beautiful Airbnb, and then it all started, and it started, and it was going, and it was going, and at that point, I think there was about 300 kids that had been killed, and that photo, I think it rings so true, and it touches, and it has touched so many people, us included, because we were sitting there and we had a discussion between us, and we said, we have whatever 3 million followers on social media, and we've always advocated for Palestine, without any
Sure.
regard for anything. And that was a moment for us, like in the same regard that social media is what we do for a living, right? Son is a social worker, I'm an aircraft maintenance engineer by trade, and it's what we do so it's our bread and butter. It's what provides the life that we live. And we looked at each other and we just said, that we have no choice, that this is all in for us. And I always think of that picture as, as like it's almost like to me that, you picked up the flag and you're charging forward, and we're all right behind you, right? Because to me, that's what it was. And to so many other people, millions of people around the world, and that your bravery, and not even knowing, because I didn't know any of this about, what happened the previous year and the selling the home. And that photo is such an iconic picture that holds so much weight.
Real? Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
I had no idea.
I know, and that's the interesting part is that when Sana showed me, because again I'm anti-social media, she's the social media one. When she showed me that picture, I felt every bit of what you were feeling as a father and a husband, and your position about the weight. You could feel that without even knowing you at that time, and it really helped to inspire so many people to be brave in the face of persecution. We got dropped by the agency that we worked with, and we lost brand deals and whatever, but at the end of the day, it was the best thing that ever happened to us. Right? It opened up where like we say that where God closes one door, He opens another. He never leaves you without something to walk through.
And makes your path clear, right?
It makes it so clear and so easy. So I know all the cameras are about to overheat and die. So I want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for taking the time out to come here and to spend time with us and eat with us and have this conversation.
Let's do it again. No, listen, we'll next time let's try to meet you all in Malaysia
Absolutely.
and do it there. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
That
we'll
would be
figure it
great.
out. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's an open invite to you guys for sure. Bring the family. As many of them as you can, collect up
It's
at
a lot of us.
Yeah. But we're just real quick. I was so excited before I was banned from Instagram. It had gotten to the point where I could see like the top 10 cities of my followers, and like the number 3 city was in Malaysia.
Amazing.
And like before October 7th, the top 10 cities of my followers were all in the United States.
Wow.
And before I was banned, 6 of the top 10 were outside of the United States.
Amazing.
And so what we knew was that the world was watching.
Absolutely.
And so we don't regret anything that we've weighed into or said, and it's
put us on this path,
Yeah.
which he said so often, so many times over the past month or so. I don't know that we would have found Islam had his Instagram account not been taken, because
Absolutely.
it cleared out so much space.
Gave you time.
Yes,
right? Give
exactly.
you that mental clarity.
Yep.
So I would like to ask this to the guests, that if you could give an advice, a statement, your heart, whatever it might be, if you could look to, which camera we got here is the best one? The middle one? The furthest one? Okay, so this camera here, and just to the people who are listening, to the world, to anyone and everyone, what would you say to them at this moment in time?
Oh, do you have some smart advice first?
I don't know if it's smart. You go.
Oh, you have something?
Please.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, well, wow, that's actually hard, man. I mean, I'll say something that I've been trying to say to kids all over the country and around the world. It really applies to adults. It's so easy to think about the end of the impact you want to have, but before you ever get to the end, you just have to start where you are. It doesn't matter if it's fighting for Palestine or if it's fighting for your city or your school. Wherever it is, you just have to start, and you have to start locally. People are so worried about who's not going to be there or what may or may not happen. The truth is, yes, there is oppression, and I've spent my life fighting against oppression. But we talk ourselves out of most of the things that we don't do, more than other people talk us out of it. So I just want to encourage people, particularly as we continue to fight against this genocide, start on your job. Start with your family. Start with your school. Start where you are and just go from there. Does that work?
Yeah, and I would say be brave.
For sure.
I think that, sometimes I feel bad because people will come up to me and say, oh, thank you so much for everything you do. And I'm like, I don't do anything. Like he's the one who says all the stuff. He's the one that goes all the places. And I'm a very cautious person by nature, but I would say if these last few months have taught me anything, it's to be brave. And one of my favorite thinkers is Rumi, and he says the place where the wound is where the light enters. And I think about that because oftentimes we're afraid to be brave because we're afraid of how it will hurt us or what it will cost us. But whatever it costs you and in whatever way it hurts you, honestly, what you get out of taking that step, making that brave stance, that whatever wound might be created is also the place where the light enters. And I think that has been so true for us in these last few months.
Wow. Thank you guys so much for everything once again. That couldn't have said it better if I tried. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Most definitely, there is a huge chunk that we didn't get to, but maybe in a more tropical location, inshallah, we will get to have that conversation. I want to thank everybody, especially these guys behind the cameras, for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.
We will most definitely put their details on. If you need a podcast set up at your own home in the GTA, these are the guys. So I just want to say, thanks to my amazing co-partner,
Absolutely.
my ride or die to Sana for this is something that she has looked forward to and she has wanted to get done. Was a sit down with you guys, and
we have to see you again.
Yeah, most definitely, inshallah. So some of this one's for you. She is obviously back and forth, and you might notice during the editing process or after, for sure. But so that's definitely thanks to her for making all this happen, and for you guys for being here. And just like they said, you guys, that we all have, in some capacity, we all have the ability to speak up in whatever way we can. As Shaun was mentioning, whether that's your family, your circle, whatever it might be, education is key. And if we're not educated, we don't have a dog in the race. In today's day and age, we have no excuse. We have social media, we have the internet, we have Google. So educate yourselves about not just what's going on, as we understand and as we know that this whole issue didn't start October 7th. This is a very long-running issue. It has a long history of ethnic cleansing, of apartheid, and now what has turned into a genocide. So my heart goes out to everyone who's affected by what is going on, and just know that the people of the world, the youth of the world, the elders of the world, they're waking up to the struggle of the Palestinian people. And you will not go quietly into the night. We are here for you. We love you, and we will continue to do what we're doing. We'll continue to stand up for justice in the face of tyranny and oppression, no matter what, until our last breaths. Ameen. Allahumma ameen. Thank you all so much again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.